6 to 18 months, maybe about a year on average, is how long it takes new money to affect the price level. And so some of the things that we're seeing today in terms of big increases in the price level may have been caused by the government creating too much money a year ago and not realize until too late that it was doing that. So it's important that we make a distinction between what's happening on the real side of the economy, that are items really more expensive to produce or are they really cheaper to produce, as opposed to price changes because of changes in the money supply.
In a recent interview of U.S. News & World Report, Secretary of the Treasury Blumenthal blamed our current rising inflation in a large part on our foreign trade and unions.
And now, the second big reason for inflation is Vladimir Putin. Gas prices, not a joke. Make no mistake, the current spike in gas prices is largely the fault of Vladimir Putin.
He did, however, say that the government was little to blame. Would you like to comment on that?
Yes.
The government manages the money supply in the United States. The Federal Reserve is the name of our central bank, and they control the amount of dollars in the economy. And so when the Federal Reserve puts too many dollars into the economy, that tends to drive up prices. And so that's the question that we're normally thinking about in terms of inflation. Are increases in the average price level caused by problems on the real side of producing those things, or are they caused by problems on the monetary side of the government putting too much money into the economy? And so that's really the big question in any period, but especially right now, especially in the post-COVID period where we're suddenly having a lot of inflation. Both of these things are having big effects, that there are definitely problems with the supply, that it's become more expensive to produce things for a little while because of supply chain shortages, and that we just don't have enough stuff because we've shut down the economy and haven't been producing very much for a while.
This is going to be a very painful, very painful 2 weeks.
But also the Federal Reserve has created so much money that that seems to be driving up the price level as well.
This is not a financial crisis. This is just a temporary moment of time that we will overcome together as a nation and as a world. Tonight, I am announcing the following additional actions.
We must think big for the people now, because if we don't, it will cost more in lives and livelihood later.
If passed, the new bill would be the biggest emergency spending measure in U.S. history.
And so right now we're in a situation where we've got very big increases in the price level that we haven't seen in 40 years. And we're trying to figure out how much of this is being caused by real factors of the economy and how much of it is being caused by the government just printing too much money.
Last night, Biden unveiled a major legislative package to address the twin health and economic crises that have spun from the pandemic. His $1.9 trillion plan includes $1,400.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
So in the short run, there can be disturbances that cause big changes in the price level because of real factors. You know, things, again, like the pandemic and potentially difficulties with supply chains, that companies that want to manufacture things just can't get the products that they want. And the same is also true on the employment side, that maybe companies just can't hire enough workers right now and are having to offer higher wages because of that. And so maybe, you know, both wages and prices. Right now, wages are going up, but not as much as prices, right? And so both of those things might be affected by supply factors. But those are typically only short-run effects. Over the longer run, the price level is almost entirely determined by changes in the money supply. And so those changes are sometimes hard to measure and hard to know how they're going to be affecting the economy, because they do operate with a lag. Typically, we think 6 to 18 months, maybe about a year on average, is how long it takes new money to affect the price level. And so some of the things that we're seeing today in terms of big increases in the price level may have been caused by the government creating too much money a year ago and not realize until too late that it was doing that. And so that's a really important question, that it's just very difficult to tell in the short run whether this is a problem caused by the money supply. But because it's happening month after month after month for a long period, we probably tend to think that is not a short-run change that's being caused by real factors. It's probably a bigger long-run change being caused by, too much money printed by the government.
I say printing press, of course, in the modern age, we do it in a more sophisticated way. We use bookkeepers and accountants and computers. But it comes down to the same thing. Inflation is made in Washington because only Washington can create money. And any other attribution to other groups of inflation is wrong. Consumers don't produce it. Producers don't produce it. The trade unions don't produce it. Foreign sheiks don't produce it. Oil imports don't produce it. What produces it is too much government spending and too much government creation of money and nothing else.
It's certainly a fact that since we left the gold exchange standard of Bretton Woods in 1971, the average inflation has been much higher. The United States, prior to 1913, was on a decentralized gold standard where we didn't even have a central bank. All of the money was just produced by regular banks. And at that time, they had to match supply with demand. They couldn't create too much money because no one would take it. And so we tended to have a very stable price level over the long run, maybe fluctuations from year to year up and down. But very stable long-run price level, which we have not had under the Federal Reserve. So the Fed started in 1913. We were still on the gold standard at that time. In 1933, during the Great Depression, the government ended the gold standard and, in fact, confiscated people's gold and said, other than jewelry and small coin collections, people had to take all of the gold that they owned and turn it into the central bank in return for dollars. And so that meant that the government was no longer bound by a domestic gold standard. But internationally, we were still on the gold standard until 1971 through the system called Bretton Woods that emerged after World War II.
At Bretton Woods, New Hampshire, delegates from 44 allied and associate countries arrived for the opening of the United Nations Monetary and Financial Conference. Invited by President Roosevelt to the first major world financial meeting since the London Conference of 1933, they will work in the seclusion of this White Mountains resort. These meetings are designed to promote trade in the post-war world and to create a foundation for lasting peace.
And it wasn't until after that system was ended in 1971 that we severed the final ties to the gold standard and started having repeated high rates of inflation in the United States.
President Joe Biden has minted his own slogan to explain it, the Putin Price Hike.
I'm doing everything within my power by executive orders to bring down the price and address the Putin price hike.
The government has every reason to say, it's not our fault, it's all these other things, it's the war in Ukraine and some other problem that we didn't realize before, and imports and exports, and anything that they can say to say it's not their fault. They definitely come up with a variety of reasons.
My own perception of inflation has totally changed after, I was there in the 80s, and at this point I'm like, bring it on.
Before you clap, let me point out that the reason why we have too much printed spending and too much printing of money is because you people want it. You and I. We're citizens, we run this country. If Congress has been voting higher and higher spending, why? Because it has been politically profitable for them to do it. If they have been voting higher spending and not voting the higher taxes to pay for it, why? Because it's been politically profitable to do it. We would all like to get something for nothing. And so the political process has been leading to Congress increasing spending, not increasing taxes, and financing the difference by the hidden tax of inflation. I think we are unwise. But let's not blame the others. The problem, in that famous statement of the cartoonist, we have met the enemy and they is us.